Hello and welcome. This is another of the 10-minute tip series of recorded programs for credit and collection professionals. This one is titled Negotiation Strategies and Tips for Credit Professionals. My name is Michael Dennis. Let's jump in. I believe that in the credit and collection department, collectors need to be or become negotiators, not note takers. Negotiation for any person is a skill that is improved through practice. The process of negotiation involves looking for an outcome that satisfies the needs and requirements of both parties. It is my considered opinion that developing your negotiating skills is a critical success factor for your career in business-to-business credit and collections. In today's program, we're going to talk about a variety of techniques that would make a collector a better negotiator in interactions with customers and other similar parties. Goals of this program. The first is to help you become more comfortable in negotiating with your delinquent customers. Another is to learn to negotiate every time a customer does not respond to an inquiry of yours about the status of a past due balance with an offer of immediate payment in full. Another goal is to examine the ideas that improve the outcome of negotiations and develop a strategy for every negotiation to ensure that it's successful or as successful as it can be. Another goal is to understand the principle of win-win negotiations and to examine if and when and how to make concessions in negotiations with your delinquent customers. I also want to examine a couple of different topics. One is about listening and the other is about self-confidence. So it turns out that listening to your customers is a critical success factor in negotiations with those customers. Listening is an undervalued and underrated skill. Among other things, listening can result in your customer feeling respected during a negotiation and a discussion. And listening on the part of the collector demonstrates a sincere interest in the customer's perspective. And I would add that collectors need to have a sincere interest in understanding what it is that the customer is telling them that they can or cannot do and why. In connection with self-confidence on the part of the collector as a negotiator is an important skill to have. And self-confidence in this context results from practice and experience and training and education. And I can illustrate the idea of the importance of self-confidence with this. The first 5 collection calls I ever made professionally were frightening. The next 50 weren't too bad because I was more self-confident. And the next, 5,000 haven't been bad at all because my confidence level was significantly higher. That is one of the benefits of being self-confident as a collector. It enables you to negotiate more effectively. Aim high. We aim high in preparation for negotiations with delinquent customers because we recognize it's easier to run downhill from that high expectation than it is to run uphill during the discussion. It turns out that business-to-business collectors who have high collection targets commonly and consistently outperform those with low aspirations and lower collection targets. As you know, in negotiations, our goal is to get a commitment for immediate payment in full. And the fallback position is this. If we're convinced that the customer literally cannot issue an immediate payment, then what we're negotiating for at that point is a reasonable and realistic commitment from the customer for payment. With that idea in mind, with the immediate goal and the fallback position in mind, we make concessions slowly and reluctantly in negotiations. And in a negotiation, we make concessions only if we're convinced that the payment proposal by the customer is in fact the best they can offer, meaning the best that we're going to get. Try to manage your emotions. During a negotiation with a customer, it's important to stay calm even when the customer is not. In a negotiation, the only person's emotion that you can control are your own. And the reality is this: if you act emotionally, the results of the negotiation will not be optimal for your organization. It turns out that emotional outbursts during negotiations can make a bad situation even worse and ultimately can delay your legitimate collection efforts. A debt negotiation strategy. When you call to speak to one of your customers, before actually picking up the phone, you need to set reasonable and realistic expectations relating to the minimum amount you will accept and how soon you need to be paid. And basically, if those minimum expectations are not met, then you need to continue to discuss and to negotiate for a better payment commitment. When a customer makes a payment proposal that is below your minimum expectation, either in terms of how much or how soon, then you need to say something to redirect the conversation in a more productive direction. What I often say is something like this: unfortunately, that payment proposal is not acceptable. Who do I need to speak with about a better payment plan? Now, you might think that that is somewhat confrontational. I assure you it is not intended to be, and I assure you that the overwhelming majority of the time it is not taken as confrontational. It's a statement of fact. Unfortunately, the payment proposal is not acceptable. It's not. I can't. It's below the minimums that I've said in terms of what I expect the outcome of this conversation to be. The second part, who do I need to speak to about a better payment proposal or plan, is simply a question. And oftentimes the answer is that there is an appeal process within the customer organization, that the person I'm speaking to is not the final arbiter of how much we get paid or how soon we get paid. And what often happens is either I am directed to that other person who does make a reasonable or more reasonable commitment, or alternatively, I often get put on hold and my contact goes away for a moment, a short period of time, and comes back with a better payment commitment, one that meets the minimums in terms of either or the amount or the scheduled payment date. Slow down. What I think that effective collectors understand is that patience is a virtue. For example, if a customer is explaining why they have not paid or cannot pay an outstanding and past due balance, be patient, be quiet, and listen to that explanation. In addition, in connection with the idea of patience as a virtue, don't be in a hurry to end a discussion or a negotiation because trying to expedite, trying to get on to the next call, trying to end this one and move to the next, tends to result in less than optimum outcomes for you, for the negotiator, for the creditor company. Avoid these mistakes. Part of the way I make a living is as a consultant, and as a consultant, I get to go out and see business to business credit departments in action. And these are just some of the mistakes that I often see. I see collectors rushing through negotiations. I see them failing to adequately prepare for these discussions. I see collectors that make concessions before they have enough information to justify making a concession. I see people being intimidated by the status of the person they're negotiating with. For example, a collector might be very comfortable negotiating with an accounts payable rep, less comfortable with the AP manager, even less comfortable with the controller, and may in fact be quite intimidated by having to speak to a CFO or a VP finance about the status of a past due balance. I see people being drawn into arguments with customers, which is not a good negotiating strategy. I see people letting emotions impact their negotiations. Again, not a winning strategy. And I see collectors that are focused on winning rather than finding a positive outcome, a win-win outcome, which is a benefit for the creditor company and for the customer. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I hope you found this presentation to be interesting and or helpful. It's a short excerpt from a much longer on-demand program. To request that on-demand program or any in the on-demand series, please contact my sponsor, the Wisconsin Credit Association. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye, everybody.